Yeah, shall we get started?
Sure.
Okay, let's jump straight in. Hello everyone. Welcome to Unboxing New Music with Boon Hua. And today we have a very special guest, Miss Koh Cheng Jin.
Hi,
um,
everyone. Thanks for having me.
I just wanted to share the first time I heard of you. I remember I was asking Daryl Ang. I think he was premiering your piece maybe a few years ago with Singapore Symphony, and I was asking him, like I was really trying to look out for some young Singaporean composers, and he told me, oh, you have to check Cheng Jin out because she has a very very unique and distinctive voice, and that kind of stuck at the back of my head. I was kind of sitting on it for a while, just kind of like peeking in and out, and now I'm very happy to finally get to speak to you in person for the first time. Well, the virtual person for the first time. So uh, I think what really piqued my interest in your music is how you are you so delicately kind of balance this both east and west and also this grotesque and lyric world together. So would you like to tell everybody how you got into music and just kind of an introduction about your thinking of your compositional voice?
Sure. So actually, I started learning the piano when I was around 4 years old, and then the violin when I was five, and the yangqing when I was the Chinese dulcimer, the yangqing when I was about 6 or 7 years old, all because of my parents' encouragement. Since my brother was also learning the same instruments, but he was doing erhu instead of yangqing, so my parents decided to let me try the yangqing. It was a very memorable childhood. I had to juggle three instruments all at once. And while learning those cute Suzuki violin pieces, I was also playing a little bit of Chopin waltzes and grade 1 to 3 Yangqing pieces. So each week I had three respective lessons and had a lot of practicing to do. At the same time, I was also one of those normal shy kids handling school life simultaneously with very little social life. I then
I,
joined the Chinese orchestra in my primary school. Oh, yes.
I'm going to just
Couldn't
interrupt you
hear
because
you.
I'm just going to interrupt you here very quickly. Just out
Sure,
of
sure.
curiosity, how were you able to juggle like three instruments? I mean, I'm just asking as a parent because I want my my son to play multiple instruments too, and I'm just wondering what are your strategies when you were like handling three totally different instruments?
So when I was young, in order to have enough time for the three instruments, I had to focus on practicing them first before I did my schoolwork. So I rather give my time and energy to music first, and then when I'm tired, that's when I do my schoolwork when I'm at a more relaxed, because I feel that once you are past that prime time for practicing, you kind of don't have the mood to practice anymore later in the day. So when we're active, I think that's the best time to practice the music first, and then we do the homework at night. So that was how I was brought up in. And then I usually practice most when I don't have exams, for example. And when I have lessons, the lessons really motivate me to practice a lot, because I have to show my teacher some improvement. So I couldn't spend too much time on one instrument and then neglect the other two. So I learned how to divide my time equally for the three instruments. Still learning, yeah.
That's fascinating. Sorry to interrupt you, but and how about like starting studying music in in SOTA and how was the education there and subsequently in Juilliard?
So I was a Yangqing major at SOTA because Yangqing was the instrument that I felt the most secure with, and it was more unorthodox compared to the violin and piano. SOTA was a very indispensable part of my life. It was a great breeding ground for various experimentations and self-discovery, because I spent 6 years there and I was exposed to all kinds of music making. I had collaborations with the dance and drama divisions. I was also part of this gamelan and angklung ensemble. I played the African mbira, and I tried the Indian veena. I played lots of Chinese chamber music, and then I went to many, many lunchtime concerts by my friends, my juniors and seniors. So there were many great moments of learning and exposure, and it was really it was a fully maximized journey for me growing up. And because I already was sure that I wanted to do music, so I was able to absorb all these influences and somehow and subconsciously have them inside my compositional voice over time. And it was at SOTA that I started composing at 15 because of my school project. We had to write music to Shakespeare. We had to choose a scene in Romeo and Juliet that we like. We were studying that at that time, and I decided to choose the banquet scene, when not much things are happening, like no tragedy, no socializing, just the food scene. So I wrote a piece of neo-baroque piece just for the food at the banquet. So that was pretty fun. And then SOTA really supported me with a lot of opportunities to perform and grow as an artist. And later then I met Dr. Kelly Tang there, who was instrumental in guiding me and forging this love for composition that I have never had before. So then I started to go towards composition from there. And at Juilliard, Juilliard is also similar to SOTA in terms of its rich confluence of artistic forms and how collaborations can just happen very conveniently. Since I decided to focus on acoustic composition with Western instruments, I then involved myself more with the Western music tradition there. I was very happy that I finally had time to concentrate on improving my composition craft and technique in this conservatory environment without a care for mathematics or science, because those are subjects that I would never find personal fulfillment in, even though I may enjoy doing them sometimes. And being in a community of like-minded people who burn themselves out, striving for the higher standards in music and striving for
Oh, I think we lost Cheng Jin here a little bit. Hi, Cheng Jin. Are you still there? I think she was telling me that she has some problems with her internet connection, and so she might be having some problems in connecting. Let me see if I can help her. Oh, unfortunately, she disconnected. Hopefully, she'll get back on quite soon. But it was extremely interesting to hear about her studies at SOTA. I think SOTA is a very special place that wasn't around when I was growing up, and a lot of people in my generation. I mean, I'm not that much older than Cheng Jin, but it's still a different generation, and the dream of having a music or arts kind of um, secondary school was really not possible for many of us. And so it's really wonderful to see that School of the Arts was so instrumental in so many young people's kind of musical trajectory. And I see a lot of the SOTA alumni also in doing very well in the school that I'm teaching in Yong Siew Toh Conservatory of Music. And so it's a really kind of a heartening moment to hear about how this time has been so instrumental in her growth. Um, I'm still not seeing her. Oh, she's back on. Let's see. Hi,
Hi,
welcome
sorry,
back.
my
No,
internet,
no,
I
don't worry.
moved places. Yeah,
Better,
so
better
sorry.
connection,
Thanks for
hopefully. No,
holding on
that's
for me.
no worries at all. So
Uh,
sorry, you were cut off halfway through.
yeah, I'm glad to be back. Thank you very much for waiting. So should I continue a little bit
Yes,
more?
please. Yes.
Uh,
Maybe you have to
so
backtrack a little bit so we all know. When you were gone, I was telling them how heartening it is to see that SOTA kind of became such an important, growing ground for all these young talented people that we see in the art scene today. And when I was in school, this didn't happen. Like we had the MEP program, but that was not really not that it was not taken seriously, but it was just one subject. Whereas you're not immersed in a place where you have people from different disciplines, from dancing, from theater together. Cheng Jin, you are muted right now. Let me help you.
Yes, I just
Okay,
unmuted.
so please, would you?
So at the same time, Juilliard is also very similar as I was talking. And since I decided to focus on acoustic composition, I had to work with Western instruments lah. So I was very inspired, and I learned a lot about my own weaknesses and my strengths. And then I attribute my deepest satisfaction of learning at Juilliard to the vitality of arts that were happening around Lincoln Center area. So I went to like the bigger Met Opera productions and watched $10 Vienna Phil concerts. And then also went to downtown area to look at all those new music happenings. So it was a very, I know, I just find it interesting that the new music concerts are in the quiet and secluded areas because, maybe not many people go. But then that's the places where you get to meet people like Warrinen, Steve Reich, and Thomas Eder. So it's actually very interesting. And then I had a great time attending a lot of concerts and learning about music as I go. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So I'm very curious about how so you mentioned that the composition part really started during this project in Shakespeare. And so before that you never really dabbled into composition or?
Yes, so actually before that I've never done any composing. It's hard to believe because I didn't have any motivation to write music before that time. And I was inside SMYO, so it was very fun. I was there since I was 11 years old. I was one of those younger kids lah, but I was inside the Symphonia, so you probably didn't see me. And then I was having a lot of fun playing symphonic music. That's the first time I get to behold an orchestra in person, work with conductors from all the way. I was in the Maestro Lim Soon Lee generation, and all the way to Maestro Darrell Ang, and then that's where I left, and then for my studies lah. So it was a lot that I've seen. And then at that time in SNYO, I really learned a lot about symphonic music and what orchestral music can do in general, because I was usually playing Yangqing by myself at the side and playing violin in my own room. So it was very isolated before that. And it was in SNYO that I decided that I cannot live without music, and that music is the ultimate meaning of my life. And but I still didn't want to write because I thought that the music that I was performing and I was listening at that time were already complete in themselves. They gave me the most emotional and cathartic experience that I felt like, what can I add even if I write something new? Like the humanity is already benefiting from all this music that's already being written and still yet to be discovered. So I didn't feel particularly motivated to write until it was required by a school assignment. And that was how I got into writing. It was very unexpected, and I didn't foresee that I was going to go into that for a long term.
Wow. And so when you started, like, how did you manage to you mentioned once you got into Juilliard and you had a more kind of a Western training, that you saw more of your strengths and weaknesses. Like how was this journey of self-discovery and kind of pulling both sides, both kind of the Eastern and the Western training, so to speak?
When I went to Juilliard, there were just so many great musicians and composers there. There were composers who started writing at 12, 13, and then versus me, I just started 15, 16. And then I felt quite understanded because I felt like everyone was way better. They had already like 10 symphonies and all that. And I only had one orchestra piece. And so what I did was I tried to put away my my preconceived notions of composing and start to write from nothing and try to see if there's a way I can incorporate my own identity into my own composition voice. So I felt like that was the thing that sets me apart from everybody else as a composer. And that's what we need now in the world. That we need to see different personalities in composition. We don't want just emulation. Like there's something has to grow from that. So that was my main motivation. So in my music, I didn't consciously say, oh, I want to include Chinese music reference, or it has to have some modes, something that people can latch onto and think that, wow, it's cultural, wow, it's unique. But I tried to see if the subject matter demands it. And if it does, and if there's something I'm fascinated about regarding my own culture or Singaporean culture or anything, that's when I will put it in. But so a lot of my music in my first few years at Juilliard are more Western oriented in style, or more harmonic based, because I really love the power of harmonies in music. I feel like they cannot be taken out of the music. So when I went into Juilliard, I was more concerned about trying to explore harmonic capabilities. And then it was during my third or fourth year, or even a little bit during my second year, when I say like, okay, maybe it's time to see if there's a way to merge both together. So that was how it came about.
Fantastic. So I think this is a perfect kind of springboard to the first piece that we will listen to today, Kuda Kepang. So would you like to tell us a little bit about this piece before we play it?
Sure. So Kuda Kepang is probably my second piece dealing with Malay folklore and culture. The first one being a flute trio commissioned by Dr. Cheryl Lim. It's called Rasa Sayang Fantasy. And then this piece is actually inspired. It's my first pure ensemble with percussion, and it's written for the Yale Norfolk workshop. Norfolk New Music Workshop back in 2017 during my second year of undergrad studies. And I wanted to write something more meaningful, because there was already a great canonic repertoire of pure ensemble music, and what could I add to it? So I decided to find a subject matter like Kuda Kepang or Kuda Lamping. So Kuda Kepang means braided horse. It is based on the traditional ritualistic dance in Javanese and Malay communities, which reenacts battles of holy wars musically and theatrically. They use gamelan music as the basis of the entire show. And it's usually performed during rites of passage celebrations, such as birth or death or marriage ceremonies, etc. And battles of Islamic wars are brought to life with dancers riding painted horses, wooden painted horses. And as the gamelan music chugs on with heavy rhythms and interlocking patterns, so on, the dancers will first enter into a trance with the help of some smoke and incense. So they will breathe them in, and they will that will allow them to get ready to be in a state of possession by spirits. And once they are ready, they will start develop characteristics of horses, engaging in various motions, such as feeding, prancing around, or fighting with each other. And then there is one main dancer called the Danyang, and he's like the leader. He has this long whip that he will whip the ground and like a pia sound, and then the horses will move accordingly, and they will switch, and they will have different moods based on the whips. So that will excite their senses and aggravate them, and that's what I wanted to show in my music. And as the gamelan ensemble becomes more agitated and chaotic with increased speed and strength, I wanted to deviate from tradition by having the horses gradually take over the humans. So that's not inside the tradition itself, but I wanted to have my own spin. So instead of the humans controlling the horses all the time, the horses start to have a spirit of their own and then take over the humans at the end. So maybe you can spot that at the end.
Great. I'm looking forward to hearing this, as I'm sure many of our audience are. So I'm going to just jump into this.
Thank you.
Here we go. This is Kuda Kepang. was awesome.
The
Cheng
performers
Jin,
are
yes,
great. Yeah.
yeah, it was. It's I've noticed also in your entertainers that there's a very programmatic kind of element to it. Is that something that was conscious? I mean, especially for this story, because you really see how things unfold.
That's when my influence in Chinese music really shaped my inclination, because
Mm,
like, for example, 9 out of 10 Chinese music is all about landscape, our emotions, and our love for our tribe and our home. So it's always very programmatic. Like in a Chinese piece of music, you will see 影子 introduction, and then some 快板, some fast moving parts going on, and then another more emotional part, and then a rousing ending. So that's very influential for me, since I play a lot of Chinese music, and I wanted to express some kind of narration in my music. I feel that programmatic elements are the greatest inspiration behind most of my music, as opposed to writing absolutely and abstractly. I think that's something I might need to work on, is to see if I can be fully abstract. But right now, as I'm still growing, I think programmatic elements are very motivational for me as I write on.
and how about this kind of the non-musical inspirations? Like, did you try to find maybe this specific kind of Malay or Javanese folklore to work on, or how did that happen? How did the subject matter happen?
Uh, Firstly, because I used to dabble in a bit of gamelan music when I was in SOTA. So that did help to ease this transition into appreciating another culture that's not mine. And it drew me to see what kind of context the gamelan's being used in. And if you search gamelan music on YouTube, mostly the first few videos will be like with dance. Now they are usually with dance, and they need body expressions with the music, and that's amazing. But then I chanced upon a video of the Kuda Kepang happening in Singapore. Actually, it was not in person. It was during one of my findings on YouTube. You know, the secret composer trying to find everything online. But so that's when I found out, oh wow, there's this kind of thing, and I never knew about this ritualistic dance that's happening. So I decided that maybe more people can know about this, and thus I decided to immortalize it in my music, especially this ensemble with percussion. Like, why not? It did suit a little bit of what I'm trying to look for.
It's quite a big percussion setup, right? Because I remember seeing some videos of it, and it's like
Yeah, it's a bass drum, and then just one percussionist, but she's like, everything is right in front of her. Then the whip, of course, she can't take the whip out to whip like I wish to, so it's mounted lah. So that helps.
and there was my son running out from his room.
Oh no, I hope
Um,
my music didn't scare him.
no, I'm okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh, that's great. And maybe with that we can kind of pivot into poetry, which will be kind of your next piece. The two songs by Two Douglas Stewart Songs. How did this interest in poetry? Is it also kind of the SOTA exposure that made you interested in?
Yeah, because in SOTA we had to analyze so many poems, but it's usually the great poems that were like Walt Whitman and
Mhm,
other people, but that I've already forgotten. But then it was during my third year at Juilliard when I have this really great soprano friend called Vivian Yao. She's one of these amazing soprano divas at school, and she's so talented. So I decided to dedicate my second piece for voice for solo voice to her, and I decided to write a piece just for her. So as I begin my quintessential search of poetry on highly inspiring websites such as poemhunter.com, etc., I chance upon the poetry of this guy called Douglas Stewart, who actually died. So he was born in New Zealand. He was a 20th century poet, but born to Australian parents. And
mhm,
because he was greatly in love with New Zealand poetry, so he in New Zealand landscape. So his
yeah.
poetry really reflected that passion and appreciation for nature, and a lot of his poetry are very cute, like there's like the spider, the frog, and all that. But then when I was reading and reading, I saw fungus and lizard, and I saw that these two poems contain a lot of potential for musical drama, and that's what put me to set music for them. So yeah, so that's why it happened. And Irfan is the one who plays the piano in this recording. Yeah.
Great, fantastic. I remember just watching the SSO concert of Beethoven's Choral Fantasy, which he was playing as a soloist, and it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, he's
Um,
inspiration.
Great. Maybe let's dive into the these two songs, and then I would really love to get your thoughts about, I think, poetry. Like I took literature as well when I was in high school, and I was in JC, and things, it was always a subject to me. There was always kind of a barrier. But Chinese poetry to me just is so beautiful. I mean, there's no need for so many words. Each word has so much meaning, and I'm just wondering if that was something that you might have looked at. But before that, let's jump into the music, which I think everybody is dying to hear. So let me pull this out. And this is Two Douglas Stewart Songs for soprano. It's late. Okay, here we go.
Leave it alone! Don't touch it! Oh, but don't touch it! That crimson is nature's warning. Those specks that blotch it with their leathery stench of corruption, poison, and say it is only a fungus, speckled and crimson with gaping throat and tentacles waving under a log in the sun. But then how it loves to hide in the dark, where the grass is thick and soft. Leave it alone, for white like the egg of a snake, in its shell beside it, another begins to break, and under those crimson tentacles, down that throat, secret and black, still gurgles the oldest ocean, where evil and beautiful, sluggish and blind and dumb, life breathes again, stretches its flesh the silver salt bush bower, dancing no snot, and the eagle struck. When somebody moved the pebble, and on the purple stones that day, a bicycle lizard stood on its tail and rapidly wheeled away.
Great.
Thank you. Sorry, I moved place again another time.
That's fine. Cheryl had a very funny comment. Next piece can be called the virus.
Oh,
There's a
okay.
poem like that.
I hope so. I don't know
I
about that.
the vocal line is really kind of really virtuosic with all the
Yeah,
big
it's
beats
extremely
from low A
difficult.
to high B.
It's
Hmm.
extremely difficult. Yeah, she really put it off with Irfan. They only had 3 rehearsals actually. It was
Was this a
astonishing.
live
This
recording
was
or
a recording session that I helped to engineer. Yeah, but I
wow?
remember I was like blown away because she only did it in such a short time, and she's amazing, and they're both great. Yeah, so I owe my performance to them.
And did you get to work with the singer before in preparation for this, or this is kind of like this is the piece and then you presented it to her?
More like I presented it to her. Yeah, in the beforehand, because I kind of know she can do anything. So I just made it very. I just wanted like both the piano and the voice to be fully integrated with each other instead of the accompaniment being just the accompaniment alone.
Right, it's a very active dialogue between the two voices for sure,
Yeah,
and both are very very virtuosic as well.
yeah, it's very
Yeah,
difficult. Yeah.
yeah. I would just like to kind of get your thoughts about like the poetry question that I was thinking that like I always find Chinese poetry to be so beautiful. There's such an economy of means, and every word has so much impact. And I was just wondering if that was something that's turned up in your when you were looking for inspiration.
Actually, I fully agree with you. I feel that the beauty of Chinese language cannot be underestimated. The poetry is just impeccable, and that's why I've never felt brave enough to set them to music, because I feel that a lot of the Chinese poetry, or even short phrases of idioms or aphorisms, they are already perfect on their own. They are full of this essence that I feel like music doesn't really do anything to add them. Maybe because I'm still young, so perhaps I might find ways to integrate them into music forms. But as of now, I feel that they are in this land that I cannot reach because they are really perfect already. And I might try one day when I'm better at composing.
Just out of interest, do you um do you speak Mandarin at home or do you speak
Yes,
Mandarin? Ah, okay.
I speak Mandarin at home.
Okay, no, just something off my head. I thought was really interesting. Great. Then maybe along those lines, I think we can kind of segue into the entertainers,
Oh, okay.
which is a piece, which is a piece written for Chinese ensemble, and more specifically for your friends to perform at the SOTA concert. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about the entertainers?
Yes, sure. I'm very excited to talk about that. So it's actually commissioned for SOTA's 2018 alumni concert at Victoria Concert Hall. Since I'm always back only during summer, I felt like I had to do something meaningful with my friends back home. So this piece, that's why the instrumentation is very unique. It's for two guzhengs, two huqing, so one gaohu, one erhu, and one yangqing to be played by myself. So it's usually having all the difficult parts as well. And then the one Chinese percussion. And yeah, so that's the instrumentation. And I was inspired by Chinese street storytelling as a form of entertainment popular in Singapore up till the 1960s period. Because I came across a picture of such a scene online. It's called like 说书人, like you tell stories to the public. And the picture shows a man at the center, and his animated gestures are kind of frozen in time as he's surrounded by a crowd of curious onlookers. And this was before the time of radio and TV broadcasting. So I felt like it was one of the most stimulating and communicative experiences that we don't usually get nowadays with technology. So I wanted to preserve it, and the stories that are being told or that were being told are usually myths and fiction, martial arts novels, and this exhilarating process of telling and anticipating what's going to come next is what I hope to illustrate in my short piece for Chinese chamber and percussion for this entertainer's piece. So I incorporated a lot of my own interpretation on traditional Chinese music idioms with Western harmonies. But I have to admit that being a huge fan of the very novel sounds that Chinese instruments are able to produce, that's very inspiring and fascinating for me. So this piece becomes the best premise to utilize them with purpose and meaning. So to tell a story together. So a group of entertainers. And it features the sona. I forgot to mention the sona, sorry. But how can I forget? Yeah. So
You
it
share
features,
it for sure.
yeah. Maybe it's meant to be a surprise, but I think I spoiled it. So the sona is the main entertainer, and the rest of the musicians are supporting him in the stories that he's telling. So you get to hear different moods and characters. Yeah.
And it's very interesting that you mentioned about this picture, because I think on top of my head, I was just thinking about this other piece by one of my colleagues, Professor Ho Chi Kong, and I think he wrote a piece called Shades of Oil Lamps that was also very inspired by very similar kind of storytelling on the streets. That is kind of a tradition that's lost, something that used to be so captivating, like workers coming after they finish work and they just want to sit around, this storyteller telling them, like you say, martial arts stuff. It's so inspiring. Also reminded me of another piece by Unsuk Chin, Google On.
Oh, yes.
And also she was inspired by a picture of this kind of, scenario that, became this really 20-minute kind of mammoth
Wow.
wonderful piece,
Wow, that's
which
great.
Opus Novus performed, I think, 2 semesters ago, and that was really a lot of fun. Before we go into the piece, I had just one question about kind of my God, my brain is getting stuck now. It's Maybe let's play the piece first. Hopefully the question will come back to my head.
Sure. Also, a shout out to Koh Jin, who also has a piece called 安祥路上的说书人, a storyteller on An Xiang Road in Singapore. So we are keeping it alive.
Now I remember. I think there's always this kind of common theme of nostalgia in Singapore, especially that because we're changing so fast into, I'm sure every time you come back to Singapore from New York, you've noticed, oh, this is something new. I never realized it. At least was for me. In the past 10 years when I was living in the States and also in Europe, every time I come back during the summer, I always notice something new. Like, what is this new building? I've never seen it before.
Yeah.
And the speed of progress also has left many things behind. And I find this kind of common theme of nostalgia of things that we experienced when we were growing up. Yeah, anyway, let's
I feel you,
over
man. Yeah, I feel you.
to the entertainers. 独角戏. Okay, here
Oh,
we
before
go.
you play, I want to
Yes.
do a shout out to my players.
Mhm.
Bennett on sona, Keng Yang on 高胡, Licky on 二胡, not myself, Gu Zheng, Ping Yu and Yulin, and Yu Ru Li on percussion, and myself on Yangqing. Yeah, they are amazing too.
Yeah, Yuru and Liki has already been mentioned last session with Zhang Yi's piece. So they are like the real MVPs of this series. Okay, so here it is, The Entertainers.
Sorry to have blasted all your ears, everyone, with the sona.
And obviously, this was written for somebody very specific in mind, right? That has this kind of bravura and just absolutely in the middle of the stage and just kind of laying it out there.
Yeah, very attention-seeking piece.
I'm just wondering. I mean, of course, the idea of entertainers, is in this particular piece is about, kind of storytelling or a street theater kind of thing. But how would you see kind of the role of musicians as that in, um,
In my piece,
or just in general as well?
I feel that because the subject matters that the entertainers talk about are often varied and ever changing. And with music, I feel that our materials have to always be reinvigorating. And because as a young sing player myself, what's most important to me and what's the most attractive to me in a piece of music is not about like how perfect the music is crafted, how the techniques are amazing. It's more about whether the essence can be delivered and whether it's fun to play and to hear. So as you can see in a lot of my music, it's a lot of counterpoint and
Mm-hmm.
layers of speech at each other, and trying to make it more cohesive and collective with counterpoint. So I feel that that's how the musicians can reenact different roles, and they can bicker at each other, or they can support each other, and they get to have fun together. And that's why I really love writing chamber music, because chamber music, not only the composer can work with chamber musicians one by one, and to see and to figure out ways and explore with them with time, but I feel that chamber music allows each instrument and each soloist and their personalities to be heard. And that's why I write music, is because I want each instrument to be fully explored to their potential. And that's something that has kept me going for composing. And I think, if I don't know if that answers your question about how musicians can be entertainers, but I feel that since our existence on earth is not going to be very long, like why not make a lasting impression with on stage while we can, and in different personalities and styles. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that the point is well made about how due to your counterpoint and your way of writing, that you want to give the spotlight to each instrument, so everybody's personality comes through. And it's and how does that, maybe either in contrast or in comparison to writing for a large ensemble, maybe for an orchestra and all that, and how has your experience been with that medium?
In orchestral medium, I find myself to be very restricted, because firstly there's always lack of rehearsal time, which I understand. That makes like the connection made between the performers and the composer to be set at a bare minimum, and it's always through a conductor, and then the conductor will tell. And but I know that the orchestra is also extremely exciting, and that a lot of skill is needed to write very well for orchestra. And the ideas can be simple, it but the way you orchestrate them will make it very memorable and exciting. But with chamber music, you can have many different ideas together, and the players will find ways to absorb it into their own performance. And that's the main difference I see with orchestral and chamber music, is that you have to be more careful with orchestral writing, unless you are fully confident with what you want to use and what you want to do. But in chamber music, you can just plunge it in and then slowly find yourself in that medium. So that's just my own opinion. But I think both mediums are equally exhilarating and scintillating. And it really depends on your own preferences and as a composer, and of who you want to work with and what you want to work with, the material you want to express. Yeah.
it is it how should I face this? Do composers kind of be inclined towards writing for a larger ensemble or a smaller ensemble? At least this has been my experience with the composer friends I have, that I feel like they have certain inclinations. There are some people that write very well, kind of big picture, and long lines and with a lot of details. And there are also some that really likes to play with sound, play with it in very miniature sense, and it's very exciting, very funny usually. Um, I wonder if that is something that you also see in your kind of circle.
Yes, there are always different composers out there searching for different things with different instruments and sizes and genres. And there's no right or wrong. I just feel that it's whether you can pull it off effectively or not, whether you have a clear idea you want to express. And even if it's minimalistic, or even if it's just sounds, or even if it's purely tonal, purely traditional in scope and form, there's no problem. It's about whether you get to whether you get to say what you want to say, and whether you get to invent within this set of tradition that you're working with. Because we are always working with traditions. What we have done will never be considered original because everyone has done them already. But it's what we can do with this limited resources that we have, and how we can constantly find fresh ideas and feelings. And I think that's all very subjective. That's why we all have preferences, like what we love and what we not love. So that's the exciting thing about writing and composing in this time and age.
Yeah, I think the idea of fresh feelings, of fresh atmospheres is really interesting. I mean, kind of in a Western context, maybe going back to the Kuda Kepang, I mean, the idea of incense, the idea of smell of something smoky. I mean, there's mysterioso, there, of course, in music there's mysterioso, but having the very, very strong, kind of one point of sense that smokiness is very, very specific. And I thought you did that very, very beautifully in the music. And of course, in the trance, kind of spinning out of control in some ways at the end with the whips.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. And I would just like to take this opportunity to ask the audience if there's any question that you would like to pose to Cheng Jin, please post them now, so you can get to talk about them. Before we conclude, I would just like to ask you about, most of your pieces that we played, they are quite short. And is that something that you are quite, your process of composition has also a big part of kind of cutting out stuff that, kind of trimming the fat, so to speak? Or it's just something that you like to keep it kind of small and concise?
I find that writing long pieces, let's say over 10 minutes, over 15 minutes, is always a struggle for me, because my ideas come quick and sometimes they evaporate before you get to know. And that's been how my music is flowing. Sorry, my clock. And yeah, so I feel that I have longer pieces, but they haven't been recorded yet, actually. And right now, the ones that I am most comfortable with are these short miniatures, because they contain a lot. So 1 minute of material for me is maybe like 10 minutes worth of material, but all like wrapped up together. So that's also my style. And then I feel like maybe one day I can learn how to elongate them more. But right now I feel that it's a lot of rash of emotions going quick at each other. And yeah, but I have longer pieces. They haven't been done yet or performed yet, but soon, and I will let you know.
Yes, absolutely. Please let all of us know. And then kind of a follow-up. And so what other pieces are you working on at this moment? What's your next upcoming
Wow,
project that you'd like
okay.
us to know?
I just finished a piano trio that's part of the commission, and it's about 10, almost 10 minutes long. And then that might be performed this fall in school. And then right now, I also just finished a solo viola piece for an ensemble intercontemporanean violist. And then after this, I think I'm going to start working on my Chinese chamber ensemble piece for the Dingy music company in Singapore. And I'm very honored and grateful that they are believing in me to write a piece for them. So thank you so much, Dingy. And also shout out to Mr. Kwek Ling Kyong, who has always been another inspiring mentor of my life. And after this Dingy piece, I might start working on a solo oboe piece for my friend at school. So it's a very busy summer for me for now. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
all.
that's not just all. That's a lot going on. Yeah, and I remembered also with Mr. Kwek Min Kyung. Actually, we just had coffee maybe a few months ago, and we just kind of met on the street out of nowhere, and we thought, hey, why don't we just hang out? and I
Wow.
just had 1 hour of just chatting with him, and I just had the biggest admiration for him. Yeah, big shout out to him. I know he's a big inspiration to the Chinese orchestra community. That's really
Yes.
wonderful. Great. I'm just gonna scroll through the comments just to see if there's anything we missed. Um, Lim Shenji is asking what's the latest upcoming project you're working on and most excited for. So I think we just answered that. Um, John Lin, who will be our guest next Wednesday, mentioned something about how every time she comes back to Singapore, there will be a new mall. That's kind of true.
Yeah, like
Or a new MRT line.
The NTUC beside my house is always changing in their in their look. So it's very interesting to see that.
Yeah, great. Um,
I can't
yeah,
really see the comments, but I think I'll just look at them afterwards.
it's all great comments. It's all
Okay,
very positive.
thank you everyone.
Great. So I guess with that, we will conclude today's session, and it's wonderful. I mean, I started this maybe 2 weeks ago, and now we're at episode 4, and we have 2 more episodes next week, and I'm really excited to eventually unveil what will happen after. But I would love to hear from our audience. What would be interesting to unbox for you, and what would be perhaps what other kind of expansion are you most looking forward to? So with that, thank you, Cheng Jin, for sharing with us 3 of your wonderful pieces. And I wish you all well. And I think that after the circuit breaker, it would be really great to, kind of see everybody out together having coffee if things go back to normal.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a fun and pleasure experience sharing,
Great.
yeah, and talking so long about myself.
Don't be shy about it. I think you have so much to be so proud of. I mean, you're at such a tender age and you've accomplished so much. And I must say I didn't even start conducting until I was like what 26 or 27. So I mean,
Wow.
kudos to this immense talent, learning 3 instruments at a tender age. Oh my God.
Oh, thank you for all you're doing for the new music scene in Singapore and championing us and conducting works and making our voices be heard. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, my
Thank
big
you.
pleasure. And thank you to everybody listening in. So I hope to see you next Wednesday with John Lin and then next Saturday with Tan Yu Ting. Thank you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye bye. Bye bye.